we're so in the Browns need to lose. They need to get worried about 2027, getting a high pick in 2027. And I think what swung me over was hearing Todd Monken say, like, we want to build a winning culture. We want to win games. You know, how you fix the culture, you win. And I feel like, to me, like, that is the best way to do it. Now, it might not help you, get one of these top premier generational talents, but I think when you win games and you're part of that mentality, like, it makes things easier.
With nobody, they beat the Steelers at home last year, didn't they, guys?
They did.
I think Harold Fanning Jr. wasn't in that game putting Sean Junkins. Hey, the Steelers had something to play for, a playoff berth. And I thought the Browns won. Then you look at the last game of the season, right? Now, last time I checked, Joe Burrow was out there. T. Higgins was out there. Jamar Chase was out there. As a matter of fact, Brown was out there, and they was at home.
Can the Cleveland Browns actually win the AFC North in 2026? Because on the surface, it sounds bold, maybe even unrealistic. You're talking about a division that includes the Baltimore Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. 3 teams that don't just compete, they expect to win. So when you throw Cleveland into that conversation, the immediate reaction is hesitation. But here's the thing. This isn't as crazy as it sounds. In fact, this might be the exact kind of situation where everything lines up at once, or completely falls apart. Let's be real about where things stand. The Browns are entering 2026 with one of the most unpredictable rosters in the entire NFL. You've got elite defensive talent, a coaching staff that's been tested, and an offense that still feels like it hasn't reached its true identity yet. And right at the center of it all is the quarterback situation, which we already know is not settled the way people are pretending it is. Whether it's Deshaun Watson trying to prove he can still be that guy, or Shedeur Sanders pushing for a faster-than-expected rise, this entire season is going to be defined by what happens under center.
I'm looking at the AFC North, right? And I'm looking at the teams, and I'm looking at everything that went into it. And my take is that the Browns will win the division this year.
Here's the part nobody is talking about. Winning the AFC North isn't just about being good, it's about timing. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to peak at the right moment while your rivals slip, even slightly. And if you look closely, every single team in this division has real questions. The Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson, are always dangerous, but they've had stretches where consistency becomes an issue, especially late in the season. The Bengals, with Joe Burrow, are explosive, but injuries and offensive line concerns have popped up at the worst possible times. And the Steelers, they're always solid, always disciplined, but sometimes that ceiling just isn't high enough to dominate a loaded division.
There is a period where people have to buy in. You gotta test this coach out. You gotta understand if this is the right guy. Am I gonna follow this guy? Right? And I think looking at Todd Monken and looking at where the Browns is and how they are building their roster up this offseason, they really trying to get back to the trenches. Now, games is won and lost in the trenches, and the Browns have been doing exactly that, fixing that up.
This is where it gets dangerous, because Cleveland doesn't need to be the best team on paper. They just need to be the most complete team when it matters. And defensively, they already have the kind of unit that can carry games. When your defense can pressure quarterbacks, create turnovers, and control the tempo, you don't need your offense to be elite every single week. You just need it to be efficient. And that's where the quarterback battle becomes everything. Because if Cleveland gets even above average play from that position, suddenly this team looks very different. Let's talk numbers and reality for a second. In a division like the AFC North, 10 to 11 wins can realistically put you in position to take it. This isn't the kind of division where one team runs away with 14 wins every year. It's physical, it's competitive, and teams beat each other up. So the question isn't, can the Browns dominate? The question is, can they stack enough wins while surviving those brutal divisional matchups? And that's a much more realistic path.
I think offensively is where we didn't have that confidence, and I think Todd Monken brings that. And I think that they actually will go back to bringing the fight, and it's going to catch a lot of teams off guards because now they're not used to seeing the Browns like this, and they're still trying to figure out who they're going to be with their new identity of a head coach as well. So I think actually the Browns is set up in perfect position to actually kind of steal the division this year. And
This is where young players usually make a mistake. They think they have to do everything. If Shedeur Sanders ends up getting real playing time, the worst thing he could do is try to outshine everyone instead of just running the system. Because this team isn't built for a hero quarterback right now. It's built for someone who can manage the game, hit key throws, and not turn the ball over. If he does that, the Browns become dangerous. If he tries to do too much, things could spiral quickly.
I think that will help there, but I think Todd Monken is going to do a really good job of getting these players to believe in themselves. I think that's the number one thing that the Browns have to do. They got to have that confidence, that cocky swag. When they had that, that's when they went to the playoffs and looked really good. Obviously, the playoffs, whatever it was, but still, I think that Todd Monken brings the same type of attention and the same type of aggressiveness that we just lost in Jim Schwartz.
Now, flip it to Watson, because this is just as important. This might be the most pressure-filled season of his career, not because of expectations, but because of doubt. The narrative around him has shifted, and whether people admit it or not, he's no longer viewed as untouchable. And when a quarterback feels that pressure, it shows up in decision-making, timing, and confidence. If Watson comes out and plays like a top-tier quarterback again, then yes, Cleveland absolutely has a real shot at winning the division. But if he struggles, that opens the door for everything to change. Here's the part nobody is talking about. Coaching is going to decide this more than anything. Todd Monken has to manage not just a roster, but a situation. Balancing a veteran quarterback with a rising young player is one of the hardest things to do in the NFL. One wrong move, one delayed decision, and you can lose the locker room. But if he gets it right, if he times the transition or stabilizes the position or simply gets consistent play, that's when Cleveland becomes a real contender. And don't ignore the schedule factor either. Every year, there are games that flip seasons. Close wins, unexpected losses, momentum swings. The Browns are going to have matchups against top AFC teams outside the division too, and those games will test whether they're actually ready to compete at a high level or just hovering in the middle. Because if you're beating teams like the Ravens and Bengals but dropping games to weaker opponents, you're not winning this division. This is where it gets dangerous, because expectations can turn into pressure very quickly. If the Browns start strong, people will start believing. But belief brings scrutiny. Every loss becomes bigger. Every mistake becomes louder. And that's when teams either rise or collapse. Cleveland has been in that position before, and it hasn't always ended well. So the mental side of this season is just as important as the physical one. Now, zoom out and look at the bigger picture. The AFC as a whole is stacked. Teams like the Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills are still setting the standard. So even if Cleveland wins the division, that's just the beginning. But at the same time, winning the AFC North would send a message. It would mean this team has finally figured something out that's been missing for years: consistency at the most important position. So, can the Cleveland Browns win the AFC North in 2026? Yes, but only if everything that's uncertain right now turns into clarity at the right time. The defense has to stay elite. The quarterback situation has to stabilize. The coaching decisions have to be sharp, and they have to take advantage of any weakness from their rivals. But here's the real question. Do you trust this team to get all of that right at the same time? Because talent isn't the issue. Opportunity isn't the issue. The only thing standing between the Browns and a division title is whether they can finally stop being a what-if team and actually become a this-is-happening team. And if they don't, then we're right back here next year asking the exact same question, just louder.